targeting.
Yeah. Well, and this evidence,
And effectively.
and see, and what I guess what I find so interesting is that if you really take advantage of the information coming back to you, you can, as you said, Leo, this is a plot. I mean, we can work out what had to happen in order for this result. I mean, in order for the drivers to be signed with good driver certificates from two innocent companies, somebody had to go and break into them and get their private keys in order to sign the drivers. Stuxnet, the virus, is aware of Kaspersky KAV version 6 through 9, the current McAfee products, Antivir, Bitdefender, eTrust, F-Secure, Symantec and Symantec Common Client, ESETS, Nod32, and Trends PC-Cillin. It has code in it to specifically see that those products are in the system. And remember, one of its priorities is stealth. It very much wanted to get its work done before it was being found. So what it did was it would look in the system to see if these things were present, and if so, it would look at the exes to determine the versions, and had version specific behavior. So it was designed to go underneath the detection, and in several cases it did that by using either one of two, because it ran on all versions of Windows XP through Win 7, not earlier than XP. It used vulnerabilities that had never been published for getting admin privileges if it was not running with admin privilege, and use those in order to play some kernel level hook games in order to install itself into processes in a way that would not be detected by these intrusion detection systems that were designed to detect exactly this behavior. The rootkit that it installed, even with these tools, with these AV systems in place, it was able to install a rootkit robustly and reliably, and filter the API calls that Windows was making to the kernel, such that if a file with a .lnk extension was going to be enumerated in a directory search, and the file was 4,171 bytes long, the rootkit would just remove that from the listing, because the malicious link files that Stuxnet used were obviously 4,171 bytes long. And if a file was named ~WTR, then 4 digits .tmp, whose file was between 4K and 8 meg, but the sum of those 4 digits modulo 10 was 0, then that file would also not appear.
So, and why would that? I don't understand what that's the point of that is.
And so this was Stuxnet needed some flexibility in having in its payload, so the link files wouldn't be seen, but it needed other files from time to time that it might need to hide. And so what it would do is it designed the rootkit filter such sort of with a pattern match, so that if the pattern was ~WTR, then 4 digits .tmp, and if the sum of those digits added up to 0 modulus 10, then that is added up to 10, 20, 30, 40, for example, or 0, I guess, then that triggered the rootkit not to show that file.
So they could hide in plain sight.
Yes.
It wouldn't be an obvious rootkit file.
Precisely. So and it had to coexist. So,
right.
So this was on the thumb drive or on the system where Stuxnet was installed. It had to coexist with other things. And it would look, when it was going to jump onto the thumb drive, it would verify that the drive had not just been infected by comparing the files with the current time. It that the infection source was less than 21 days old, meaning that after 3 weeks,
it expires.
Yes, it would stop trying. It would
cool.
It was just brilliantly designed. So the point is, it was trying to not get discovered. So it gave itself 3 weeks on a given system. It gave itself 3 weeks to infect all the drives it could, and after that point, it would go silent, and just not do it anymore, because it figured, hey, if I haven't done it within 3 weeks, then and who knows what the developers knew about the protocol being used in Iran's nuclear enrichment facility. They might have known, for example, that something happened every 2 weeks or every week or something. So if they were able to get onto the machine that was one step away from the machine doing the development and controlling the programmable logic controller process control stuff, if they could get to that machine, then they knew that, like, there would be some thumb drive based communication between those two within 3 weeks, and if not, then they're just not on a machine where that's going to happen.
Sounds like they really knew not only what they were doing, but where they were going to be. I mean, this was so clearly targeted.
Yes, and the thumb drive had to have at least 3 files and 5 meg of free space, because you wouldn't want to, run into, I'm sorry, you don't have enough room on your drive to hold our rootkit and our Stuxnet virus. So one of the files, WTR4141.tmp, and if you think about it, 4141, that adds up to 10, which is 0 modulus 10. It was sort of like the advanced guard that was a small bit of code that hid its companion file tilde WTR4132. And again, 4132, that sums to 10, so that's 0 modulus 10, and that contained the entire Stuxnet payload that jumped over onto the thumb drive. When they finally got there, one file, which was a DLL on this Step 7 PLC programming computer, the DLL was S70TBXDX.DLL. That got renamed to, instead of the last characters being XDX.DLL, it got renamed to XSX.DLL, and a replacement S7OTBXDX.DLL, which was the PLC rootkit, it was installed. So essentially, this DLL that it's very comprehensive. It has like 140 different, what Microsoft calls exports. Those are like functions that the DLL can offer. The replacement file didn't duplicate all of those. For almost all of them, it simply forwarded those calls to the fake DLL to the real one, because it knew what it had renamed the real one. So when 135 of those different functions were called, it handed them off to the original DLL to work correctly. But the few that it needed to alter allowed it to intercept those functions on their way to the Siemens programmable logic controller, and essentially add its own code to the code that was being downloaded, and arrange for that code never to be visible, never to be seen. And so everything we talked about was for just the sake of getting a bit of code, custom written code, appended to the front of the code controlling the PLC, and that it also had to be that code that looked around at what it was connected to and knew whether to do anything or to stay inert.
Wow.
And so that's the history of the world's first, I mean, truly weaponized internet worm.
Do you think the people who wrote this were security researchers, virus authors? Do you think they took existing code and modified it? I mean, it sounds fairly sophisticated.
Anyone who
maybe like they contracted out. I mean, look, Israel did this, right? We know that.
Yes.
We've heard that, in fact, they had exactly the same setup intentionally. It was pretty clear.
Yes.
And they had, of course, they had means, they had the motive, because they didn't want Iran to have a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, I would